Thank you.
All right, so we are joined by the campaign strategist for the ACLU of Mississippi, Ariel Adams. We thank you so much for joining us today. This is for our college career readiness class. I've got a room full here with me at Belma Jackson High School, and we're recording this for our friends at Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, and the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you again for taking some time out of your schedule to meet with us today.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
And now before we get into all it is you do with ACLU and things that you think young people, and I agree that young people need to be aware of as they move in from high school to their college or career, whatever their next step is. Let's talk about, you are from Jackson and then went to the very prestigious Howard University in Washington, D.C. And you told me yourself that you did not even have HBCUs on your radar or even understand the importance of HBCUs before you attended one and got 2 degrees from there.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. So yes, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, born and raised. I started out at Jim Hill High School. I was in the IB program. And then I was lucky enough to be able to audition for the Mississippi School of Arts down in Brookhaven. I went there to study literary arts, which is essentially writing. I was exposed to a lot of other opportunities while there, like being able to do tech for dance or theater shows or be a part of those shows, participate in student-led gospel choir concerts, traveling around the state. So it was a very unique opportunity there. And I actually had a roommate there by the name of Kiera Jones. I hope she sees this. And she was just so passionate about getting into an HBCU. She was applying to all of them. And she started actually telling me more about HBCUs. She told me about Howard, Clark Atlanta. I knew about Spelman, but that's one that I've heard about a lot. And obviously Jackson State, because it's right down the street. Alcorn is, like those are the 2 most prominent ones in Mississippi. But at the time, I didn't recognize their identity as an HBCU and what that meant for me as a Black person, but also just us generally as a country, as a culture, as a society. So I'm very glad that Kiera exposed me to that about the importance of it. And that I just took a chance on applying. It was more for scholarship opportunities. And it was a unique situation because one of the things about MSA is being funded by the state. A lot of times we work really, really hard to get scholarships, like all as individual students. The more we can get, the more, I guess, the more credible, I guess, we seem to the state as art school. Obviously, there's also the School of Math and Science, which people are kind of, they're more understanding about the STEM part of education. And I don't think like being an art school was as well received. So we worked really, really hard to get scholarships. I think my class got about somewhere between $8 and $10 million, and there was only 55 of us. Yes, there was one student who had over $1 million in scholarship offers alone. So that was one of the reasons I had applied to so many so many schools in general. And when I applied to Howard, I know I learned so much about it, watching YouTube videos and vlogs. So there was a YouTuber, her name on YouTube was Black Girls YouTube 2. And she talked a lot about her Howard experience. I watched her like homecoming videos, her class videos. I learned that she was studying journalism and like some of the stuff she was exposed to while being a student. And that really honestly pushed me to go to Howard, that and my scholarship offer. So that was pretty much how I got on that track. I was also blessed enough, like being from Jackson, a lot of students in Jackson go through these, I'm going to say, resilience building experiences. Where maybe everything is not as easy to access. We don't have the same resources as most schools, especially in JPS. We don't have access to the same technology, the same books. So part of being in that environment and also being the daughter of a single mother with 3 other children who had to work for everything, I was really, really trying to figure out how am I going to get to DC from Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Howard University is in the heart of Washington, D.C., right there in the middle of all the federal government stuff. Really cool location.
Yes, and when I got to Howard, I got exposed to DC in a lot of ways too, and I'll touch on that One of the things that I was blessed with, because I was a student at MSA, is the principal there. At the time, it was Miss Deborah Price. She actually drove me up to Howard for orientation. Her and our tech guy, whose name is Patrick Brown, they drove me up to Howard for orientation the summer before classes started. And they also helped me get my flights so I could get to DC. They helped me get everything shipped there that I would need for my dorm. They made sure like I had people around in DC who could also be my support system. So I was very grateful to, having someone there who could also help get me there and get me to the next step. And I've kept up with her over the years. She's almost like a second mom to me at this point. So having people in your corner while you're trying to get to the next level is really, really important. And I think that's one thing that many students don't have as they're going through their primary and secondary education. It's really hard to find that kind of support, and to just get there.
Yeah, and also to understand what types of options there are, because I don't care where you're from in Mississippi, so many Mississippi communities are so sheltered because they are not made aware of what's available. And for those who may not be aware, Howard University right now is really pushing the envelope in so many ways. They recently were celebrated as having the first HBCU swim team in the country, and won championships in the Northeast Conference. And one thing I always hit on is that historically Black does not mean exclusively Black, because Howard has an unbelievable international population. Being right there in a federal government area, they really look to diversify their student body, to really bring the best of the best from all over the world.
That is absolutely correct. Being at Howard, I have to say that was one of the most diverse experiences I've ever had. Even having a large Black population, that doesn't mean everyone was African American. People were from literally all over the world, and it was mind-blowing to be able to interact with so many different types of people. It could be just that one classroom, it could be, an organization you join. Like, you just never know the types of people you'll meet there. And in addition, like, being on campus will get you so many opportunities off campus with other people that you never expect to meet. I remember one time being a part of the debate team. For me, that was like a really big deal. I was on the debate team from my sophomore year to my senior year. This was like pretty much my identity at Howard. This is the girl that debates. And one thing about debate was we became a part of the first HBCU National Speech and Debate Championship, which was started in 2018 on the campus of Wiley College. I don't know if the students are familiar with the Great Debaters, but that
Wiley College is in Marshall, Texas.
Yes, yes. And that's where, debate for Black people really started on that campus. So obviously they hosted the first one. And this was my first time debating. So being able to interact with, other HBCU students from different parts of the country was really unique. And then being a part of the team also gave me the opportunity to present kind of a policy proposal to the European Embassy in the United States.
Wow.
So, yeah, that we were the first HBCU to participate in, it's called the Schuman Challenge. And at the time we were actually discussing Russia and Ukraine. So that was very, very eye-opening for me. It was so new. I was not hip to like international policy in any way.
Yeah, and while you were in DC, you had the opportunity to work with Congressman Benny Thompson from Mississippi.
Yes.
Some things I think people don't understand. They're scared of the big city. They're scared of the big change, but that's where opportunities are formed, and you can bring that back. Like you brought it back to Jackson, but talk about your experience that you got involved in the federal government when you were in DC.
Yes. So I was trying my heart. It is really, being at Howard, especially, it's really, really hard to like make yourself stand out as as an applicant to intern in like the federal government, because everyone who's applying pretty much has the same stats. Like, everyone's top of their class, everyone's done this and that. So and being at Howard is not even like it's not it's not as much of a big deal if you intern on the Hill. It's kind of a given, like everyone interns on the Hill. But, for someone who's from Jackson, Mississippi, where first of all, it's a big deal to even get to DC, it's a big deal to get to college, it's a big deal to go to one of the top HBCUs, it's a big deal for me to be able to intern in the federal government. So part of being able to do that was I had to connect with like mentors and like other people who could really vouch for me in a way. So I ended up interning for the Committee on Homeland Security first,
Wow.
um, in Congress. So that was, I don't know, I thought I was going to be on track to like work in intelligence, you know, do something like FBI, CIA. Um, but the more I got into policy working for Homeland Security, the more I realized I really would like to do more just general policy stuff. Working for the Homeland Security Committee, though, Congressman Thompson is the chair of that committee. So I got to do some stuff one-on-one with him. But being from Mississippi is always a leg up. Being from Mississippi is always like, oh, you're from Mississippi? Yeah, you definitely got to come by the office. So the first time I got to go to his personal office, they actually just needed one of the interns to come in because their personal office intern was unavailable for the day. I believe they were sick or something. And so when someone came to the office, it's like, oh yeah, Congressman Thompson needs an intern today. I'm like, me, I'll go. And so when I went, I was just like, I'm gonna prove myself. And so I really worked so hard like that day to like prove myself and just like mingle with everybody, let them know who I was, that I'm from Mississippi, that I care about these specific issues. I guess I really impressed them, just kind of taking the chance and just putting myself out there. Because the chief of staff at the time, she invited me to intern for them in the fall. So that's how I ended up interning for his personal office. So it was kind of like a weird coincidence situation, but I was just so grateful. I was so grateful. And interning in his personal office is a little bit different from working with the committee, because on the committee, you're doing more general stuff for whatever is happening in a hearing, or maybe like the things that you see on TV where everybody's up and they're interviewing someone, or they're questioning someone, like the TikTok situation. So those are the types of things I would be preparing for, and I would work with a lot more people. Whereas in the personal office, it's just it's a much smaller staff, and I would do more things specifically for Mississippi. So that's where I like was able to cultivate all the things I already knew I wanted to do back home.
That's awesome. And that's brought you back home to now you're with the ACLU of Mississippi. Now, one thing about me is I don't think it's a teacher's place to ever tell anybody who to vote for, how to vote, or anything, and I never will. That's just not, and I'm not smart enough to tell anybody anyway. But I have a huge problem when young people leave high school and they're not aware of any of the issues that affect them every day. Because and I know that's what you guys do here in the state, is you really try to make people aware of issues and let them know things that affect them that maybe the press isn't talking about. Because so often I hear young people, they turn old enough to vote, they turn 18, and they don't vote because, I only vote for the president. Well, the president doesn't have jack
Hmm.
to do with anything in the Jackson area in the state of Mississippi. I know President Biden is coming to Rolling Fork this week, but that's because they had a disaster. I'm old enough to remember all the way back to President Reagan, and the only time I ever remember presidents ever coming to Mississippi was when they were wanting to vote or there was a disaster. So who is in Washington, D.C. has very little, in my opinion, to do with what goes on here in the state, but who is in our local offices and in our state offices and our county offices. It's so important. And that's what you guys do to get the awareness out there to say, look, this is what these candidates are saying. This is how this affects you. We've got to advocate for your rights. And again, these young people, we got a state election coming up. Some of these kids are going to be old enough to vote. They need to be aware of what affects them, especially if they're wanting to go to college, or if they don't want to go to college, if they're going to get into the workforce, they're going to need to know how they're going to be taxed. So talk about some of the issues that you guys deal with and how you educate young people that are becoming old enough to vote as they leave high school to be aware.
The first thing I'm going to say is we do have the Leaders in Action, which is for young people to sign up to work and volunteer with us. Just want to throw that out there if anyone wants to go to the website and volunteer with us. We always try to make sure we're roping young people into the issues through Leaders in Action, making sure that we can take them to the Capitol, let them see how a bill is made, how it's passed. When people approach us and are like, we have this opportunity for young people, we really want the ACLU involved, ACLU of Mississippi involved. How can you guys help? What can you do? We always try to make sure we're making that connection. I will say one thing about me personally, and in without any affiliation to the ACLU, is that I recognize that there's almost an apathy in young people for what is happening around them. There's a disconnect between what what has been done to quote unquote help and hasn't happened, what they can see affecting them immediately,
Absolutely.
in conversations with them though. So like I've talked to my younger sister, she's 16, and her general sentiment is it just doesn't matter. Like it just doesn't matter. And she knows I work for the ACLU, and she'll see me like, oh, we need to do this, we need to sign this petition. And for her, because she really doesn't see how it's mobilizing older people, much less how it can mobilize the younger people. I can also say, though, that young people are outspoken and they recognize the issue. And I think one thing we have to do as well, me as a young adult and also as older adults, is to let them know that their voices matter and that it can be heard and it should be heard because they are the future. There will be no, Senate, there will be no mayor, there will be no police force if none of the young people want to get involved. So I think that's something for everyone to be aware of, not just them, but also us. I think that's the most important way that we can tell them it matters, is because one of you have to do this. At some point, one of you has to step up to the plate, and we can continue to let the loudest voices be the wrong voices, or we can make sure that there's equal opportunity for everyone to be heard, that there's authenticity, and then there's a genuine concern for the state of humanity, not just what I want personally or what affects me personally, but what affects all of us. And I think that's really why I got involved with the ACLU, because they cover so many different issue areas. And I think the best way that young people can get involved is to, one, know that your freedom comes from within. No one has to give you permission to live, to exist, and to be, and to empower yourself on whatever your passion or pursuit is. But also, that freedom will affect others. So use it wisely. You can use that freedom to support another person, or you can use that freedom to harm another person. You can use that freedom to feed your ego, or you can use that freedom to feed your spirit. And that's just my personal thing. No affiliation with the ACLU.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you 100% because the apathy is where people fall apart. And
Hmm.
when when people say I'm only going to vote for the president, but they don't pay attention to who's on their school board, to who's deciding on who's funding the schools. They don't decide who's sitting on the bench to decide criminal cases and decide civil cases. When they don't decide who the election commissioner is to make sure we're having fair elections. When they don't decide who the sheriff is to make sure the neighborhood is patrolled well. And then on top of that, if we're living in a city where the mayor has to supervise the public works, look at all the problems in Jackson. You have a public works director that is supervised by the mayor. So the mayor put the person in place that then hires the people.
Hmm.
That doesn't have anything to do with who a president is. So
Hmm.
having a voice in the way we live our life every day and the safety of everyone is so important. And just saying, oh, that's the way it's always been is the biggest mistake people can make.
Yes. And I want to add to that. No one would fight so hard to take away something that doesn't matter. There would be no HB 1310, which is a House bill designed to literally take away people's voting rights if they don't use it. No one would be fighting so hard to take something from you if it really didn't matter, if it didn't empower you in some way. I want to add that, because I think that's almost part of the problem with the apathy. I think some young people don't recognize that it does matter. It really does. And if it didn't, no one want to take your vote away.
Yeah, and I also think it's important. You know, it was not that long ago where people were being killed for people to have the right to vote. And then at the turn of the century, where women weren't even allowed to vote. And then people were killed. People were, houses were burned down, churches were burned down, just to suppress that right. And even though we still, there's still voting issues. I think anybody would agree with that. It's important that you don't make people sacrifice in vain. If things will never change. And, if you want, I hear young people say they want to do this, they want to do this, they want to do this. And that's great. We always want especially now where we're able to meet with someone like you with technology to see what's possible, because you're from Mississippi and went to one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And one thing we have in Mississippi, just everybody's in their bubble and their shelter because they're not exposed to things. Well, now they can be exposed.
Mm-hmm.
Time to start making decisions of, not only where you're going to go to college and what you're going to do, but who you're going to voice, how you're going to use your voice to change your community. And that's just so important, because as I get older and their parents get older, like you said, there's got to be somebody left.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And another thing is like not letting the world define you and who you have to become in it. I think, going to Howard, I also went to the Harvard Kennedy School. I only went for a semester.
Wow.
I withdrew. It was during COVID, right after I graduated from Howard. And a part of being in both of those spaces while also being in Mississippi, because, we're virtual, I started to recognize, like you said, some of the things that I was working towards on a higher level, so to speak, on a federal level, or trying to get into the most prestigious and the most elite places. Those places still didn't recognize where, the identity of where I'm from. Being someone who's from the deep South. A lot of people hear Mississippi and the first thing they think is lynchings. Whereas, like, as someone who grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, I've been surrounded by, Black people my whole life. So when I was in a classroom full of students who, their first time having a Black teacher was at Howard,
Wow.
and my, experiences, all my teachers were Black. So, like there's something we offer just being in the position that we're in, having to constantly fight every day. And it's like we exist in these silos that we create ourselves, really. We put ourselves in these vacuums to say that my issues aren't understood by another person, but truly, I think oppression is a universal language. If you've been oppressed in any way, then you understand what it feels like to be burdened by what someone else can do to you. And so that alone should motivate us to say, yeah, you can't do that. As long as I have the right to vote, as long as I have the right to speak, as long as I have the right to advocate, I'm going to use it.
Yeah.
Because I can do that anyway, but as long as it's legal, I'm definitely going to do it.
Yeah, and things aren't going to change until you take a stand. Whether it's in your personal life or whether it's with the government or with your education, at the end of the day, you have to control your own situation. Things aren't going to change just by wishful thinking. But I do have some questions from the students. These are all juniors, so they're getting ready to move into their senior year, so they're getting ready to make those college and career decisions. This first is Celeria Chesser, and she asked, "How long have you been interested in politics?"
I don't know, honestly. I think so. For the longest time, my interest has been coming back to Jackson to help other kids like me. And it didn't necessarily have to be in a political way. Um, it didn't have to be through education. It could have just been through mentorship. It could have just been through whatever I gain, I can give these resources back. I think I became interested in politics, like I said, maybe when I got on Homeland Security and was exposed to just like writing policy and how kind of like the broad stroke of a pen can be more impactful than on the groundwork. It seemed like to me at the time. I remember I had this little phrase I would say where I wanted to go to law school actually. And I had this little phrase I would tell myself where I'd say, "Oh, I'd rather write the law than fight the law." Right? I'd rather just write a policy, this is the law, than for me to go in a courtroom and say, but it can be interpreted this way. And then I realized that even if I were to write a law, it can be interpreted another way somewhere else. So I'm interested in politics insofar as like understanding it and how it affects the people around me. But it's not that I want to be in politics necessarily.
Yeah, I agree. You can be involved in your government without being an elected official. There's a lot of ways to work, and you mentioned some of those at the beginning. This is Harmony Williams, and she asked, "Why did you not choose an HBCU in Mississippi?"
Like I said, I really wasn't even looking at HBCUs. I don't think I applied to any HBCUs in Mississippi, if I'm being honest. Um, I
Wow.
don't know where I wanted to go to school. I think I was just going to the highest bidder, and Howard happened to be the highest bidder.
Well, that's another good point because a lot of time, it's amazing. We were looking at the beginning of the class, how much scholarship money goes unclaimed every year, and it's
Mhm.
because people don't take the initiative to go out there and find it. And there's all kind of grant money that goes unclaimed in Mississippi every year. So,
Mhm.
doing your research and taking the initiative is what can lead to that prestigious college that people dream of going to. So, I think that's a great point as well. And I'm
Yeah.
glad that you had enough initiative to do that because having to make a decision on the highest bidder is a very good problem to have.
Yeah.
Uh, this is an area Mayfield, and he asked, and you kind of just said this, but he said, "What was the number one factor in deciding to go to Howard?"
Yeah, definitely the scholarship. The other thing was I really wanted to leave Mississippi at that time. I think I had that same apathy that most young people have, that nothing is ever going to change here, that I need to get out of here. Um, yeah, I think I was just like running away. It was far. DC was so far.
And that's a great segue to this question because this is Frederick Johnson, and he asked, "How did that change of scenery change your mindset and your actions moving forward with your life?"
Good question. I was exposed to a lot being at Howard. Like I was exposed to different mindsets. I was exposed to different like there were things you could learn in a classroom, and there were things that I inherently knew because I had experienced it. Um, and then being exposed to that on a political level, on an academic level, just in conversation with people, I think that really shaped how I viewed where I was from and why I was running away to begin with. And then understanding that nothing really was going to change. Like no one's coming to save anybody in Mississippi. Most people see Mississippi as like the bottom of the barrel, and that's just the truth. That's how they see us. And there's so much more to us than that. Like we're so creative. We literally make something out of nothing every day for no reason, just because we can. I
Yeah,
think Mississippi
and I agree because the media portrays us a certain way. Then you meet people that move here from other states. You're like, "Man, Mississippi's really awesome. I'm glad I came here." I'm like, "We tried to tell you."
yeah, yeah. And, Mississippi is no different than any other state. We just get a lot more flack for our history, which
Yeah.
is the history of every state in this country.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't. I started to realize like how people view you and what you know yourself to possess are can be two very different things.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who I've met who wouldn't assume I was from Mississippi just because of how they view me
Yeah.
as a person.
Absolutely.
So, and I love to claim Mississippi. I let everybody know I'm from Jackson.
That's awesome. I've got two more from the students. This is Denoa Thompson, and he asked, "What is the biggest difference between Washington D.C. and Mississippi?"
DC is a city. Washington DC is a city. Before leaving Mississippi, like before going to DC, I guess I had never been to like an actual city where you use like a subway system. Like it's probably easier to walk than drive. Just it's very loud. It's so loud. There's sirens everywhere. Much more crowded. That's probably the biggest difference. I will say my personal bias is that our food is better down here. Um, there were there were quite a few places that were like, oh, this is a soul food spot or this is a Cajun spot. And I'd be like, no, it's not. No, it's not.
I agree. The international food in DC is spectacular, but
Yeah, now that's
what they
good.
call the American food is a joke.
Mm.
I agree. I could not agree more on that one. The other thing, I've been to DC a few times, but the weather, it gets so dang cold. That snow would just drive me insane.
Yes. Yes. The heat is different too. Like
Yeah.
it gets hot in DC, but it's not like Mississippi hot. Like Mississippi hot almost feels suffocating because we have this humidity. Whereas there, I don't know if it's because the buildings are blocking it out or maybe it's just not as humid up there, but it's not so bad in the summer in DC. There is more to do, obviously. You can really just like go outside and just decide to do something. Like
Yeah.
you could go to a park, you could go to a museum. The Smithsonian's are in DC, and I think all of them, if not most of them, are free.
Yeah, they
Um,
all are. Even
they
this,
have,
even the zoo is free. That's really cool too.
yeah, they have a really cool zoo. Of course, they have Embassy Road, which is where all of the like foreign embassies are in the United States. So like I think you have to have like special clearance to get into most of them. But like you can drive down at least. The monuments, it's a beautiful place
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
even if you don't move there, it is really a fantastic place to visit to really get a sense of melting pot of all these cultures. It really is such a cool place.
Definitely.
All right, I just got one more from the students. This is Carl Wilson, and he asked, "What's your biggest motivation as you progress through your life?"
My biggest motivation really is giving back to young people like them. Um, there's nothing that makes me happier than to expose youth in Mississippi to something they don't think is possible.
Absolutely.
So it honestly, like I'm probably gonna tear up, but like there's nothing like seeing, you know, the way their mind changes. Like I mentor young men in the Strong Arms of Jackson program, which is they're vulnerable youth. So maybe they're getting in trouble, or maybe like their peers just said, hey, I think we need to make some intervention so that my son can have a better outcome. And our last week we actually did an open mic night.
Wow.
And leading up to this open mic, I like to do open mics. So a lot of like people around here don't do this. Like this isn't a thing that happens in Jackson. It's something I kind of picked up going to MSA and then going to Howard and being in DC. So for like a month leading up to this open mic, I would ask them like, are you gonna say something? Are you gonna perform? And they're like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, it's not my thing. And so the night of the open mic, they were all on stage together. And after they were like, we need to do this every month. So, going from nah, that's not my thing to yeah, this can be my thing. There's just nothing like seeing that shift. So that's
That's
my biggest motivation.
we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for taking some time for us today. But before we go, two things. One, tell us where, if they're interested in getting involved with ACLU of Mississippi for any internships or any types of activities, tell us where to find that. But then tell these young people why that apathy that you and me have both agree that we've seen is something they need to avoid and why they need to be involved in making decisions for this community.
Okay, well, first, again, Leaders in Action is going to be the best way for young people to get involved with us. You can go to the ACLU of Mississippi website. It's aclu-ms.org. And then we have like a Get Involved tab, and then you'll see like the Leaders in Action and all of that. Or you can just sign up to volunteer. You can also become a member of the ACLU. You can just go online and sign up. You should do that. Be a card carrying member. And then I think a big reason to avoid that apathy is I'll bring it back to what I said earlier, is that somebody has to pick up the mantle. Somebody has to lead. I think one thing that our generation sadly does not have is that leader we can all look to for what's right and what's wrong. There's so
Absolutely.
much division across, society. It doesn't matter what the division is about. It's like almost every day we have a new way to differentiate ourselves. And I think we need to avoid that apathy, because the more we feed into that apathy, the more we find reasons to oppress ourselves,
Yep.
really, to tell ourselves that there's nothing better for me out there. And if there's nothing better for me out there, there's nothing better for the people around me out there. And so the best reason to avoid that apathy is so that you don't internalize it, and inadvertently project it onto someone else.
Yeah. So great stuff, and just such a great inspiration for young people to get involved in these policies that affect them every day. No matter where people fall on the political spectrum, it's just they need to be informed. They need to be informed of what affects them every day, to get out there and help make decisions for this community here in the Jackson and Mississippi area. So again, Ariel Adams, ACLU at Mississippi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank y'all for having me, and feel free to reach out anytime for anything your class needs. Like if I can look at an essay for college, if I can give them study tips for the ACT, I'm as accessible as they need me to be.
Oh man, in the fall, we're going to really love to have you for some ACT stuff.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, talk to you soon, my friend.
Okay, bye.
See you.